Setting up recording. Let's see what happens if I put the video up on this. Let's see what this is doing here. Oh, that's a reflection of me in the screen of the computer. Go. Little complex technology here for the first meeting as I show the screen before Zoom is installed, before anything's installed in it, actually. So, better angle. I think that's an awful angle. Just straight and then move the computer. I think I can spotlight. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And well, that's pretty much the whole screen. Okay, now I can unspotlight it, I think, hopefully. Where is that? Oh, remove spotlight. Okay, and you all should go back to gallery view until we're ready to spotlight the screen again. If you want to see everyone. Okay, well, we are recording. Waiting to see if we get anybody else. Let me see, waiting. Oh, there's Mark, admit. Okay, Mark Schulman is about to join us. We are recording, and this is the first Central Florida Computer Society Linux Special Interest Group Zoom meeting. Welcome all. Let's see, Dick Vogel. Okay, admit. First time I've had host control here to add people as they come in. So the intent is, as I've sent out in the previous group emails on Google Groups, to do a complete install of Linux. We've chosen Linux Mint, Cinnamon Desktop, from the hundreds, if not thousands of distros that are out there. And tonight, what I want to do after we each introduce ourselves, go around, and is go through the procedures of installing, hopefully we'll get it complete, Linux Mint in the computer which you see right now in Windows as one of the participants in the meeting. What I've done essentially is put my cell phone on a gyro stabilized mount on a tripod, and it is pointing at the screen of a Lenovo computer. It's about a 5-year-old computer that we purchased from Smart Guys Computers in Altamont Springs. And Glenn Cofield, the owner, gave us a nice discount to the Computer Society. And for now, the intent is to use this primarily to support the special interest group. So I won't be putting anything personal on it. And anything that we do with this notebook will be done live in the special interest group. So from week to week, I won't be doing anything offline. And that way we'll all have a chance, and we'll have this recorded as we go past the installation phase. John, I know you've done a good job for APCUG in their Wednesday workshops with a Linux Mint Cinnamon desktop review and the various different options. So when we get to the point of actually configuring the desktop, I want to make this as interactive as possible. You know, I'll take your guidance as to the sequence to go through it. Mint itself has a very nice setup routine anyway, where it sort of walks you through. But we'll do our best to do that. Let's see if there's anybody else in the waiting room. Yeah, there we can. Admit. Okay, we've got some more folks joining us. Get everybody in. Is everyone that's here getting their messages okay from the Google groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Probably best question is asked, is there anybody that's here that hasn't been getting their messages from the Google group? Okay. I had considered a number of different ways to communicate. In fact, let me just move this over and bring up a screen to share. Okay, let's see here. Share my screen. Screen 2. Okay, so this is the CFCS Linux SIG Google group as I see it as the owner, and as Stan can see it as well. And anybody who actually signed in with, and let me just go down to members here. Anyone that signed in, for example, with an @gmail.com email has access to this screen where you can see the entire thread of everything that's been posted to the group. So for those that arrived late, the group will in fact archive some of the things that I thought would be good to look at. Computer specifications are available on this Lenovo that we've got. There's an interesting comparison because it's a typical question. Well, why should I install Linux when I've got a perfectly good Windows operating system? So it does, this particular YouTube video that I found does kind of answer that question. And there's lots of reasons to do Linux, and I don't want to get into political or paranoid kind of things, but Linux to me does have a lot of advantages over Windows in giving you better privacy and better control. And then I found some interesting things when I was just myself just trying to delete some files. And I said, how do I actually delete temporary files, web cache, things along those lines? And I found an interesting video on that. And then we did have a short discussion on TeamViewer and alternatives. So I've used TeamViewer a lot in both my personal and semi-professional help desk kind of operations. So I wanted to see if that was available, and sure enough, it was available. So these things are already archived. I think we'll eventually get into talking about scripts. So there was an interesting video on that. There's in YouTube, there are tons of best of useful applications. So as a part of our process, we'll actually see what comes with the Linux Mint Cinnamon installation. We'll actually take a look at some of the software and what's available. And then various different resources I thought that were good to see. There's a Linux magazine, an online magazine that I stumbled across. And then this was our announcement of the first meeting. So all these, anything that we reply to as individual emails or originate as individual emails are available to those that have Google accounts. And if some of you who signed up not using a Google account wish to also have a Gmail account and get one subsequently, or have one, and send me an email and let me know that that's the case, then we can add you a second time and then choose which account will actually send you the email announcements. And I'm in here, for example, a couple of ways as the owner, and then where I have my email sent to at Proton Mail. So at least I can show you that portion of what's available for our support group. Okay, let's see if there's anyone else waiting. Looking at the screen. It looks like everybody is aboard that requested it. All right. So a little bit about my background for those that don't know me. I've been a techie most of my life. I started as a teen, actually, repairing TV sets in our neighborhood, with a tube tester that I built from Lafayette Radio, and doing hi-fi installations both for my family and friends and things like that. My first exposure to computers after reading the popular electronics magazines and so on was in the 70s, as I was assigned to a Navy contract management office, and they gave me a desk that had a terminal to a DEC 1170, and I had keyboard access to it, and eventually basic programming access, and access to what then were considered computer games and things like that. And that really piqued my interest. And my first computer was in the late 70s, probably one that most of you never heard of before, but it was called a CompuColor 2. And during that period of time, the Apple computer had also come out, but the CompuColor was way ahead of its time. And because of very poor workmanship and going back to the factory multiple times and then getting lost by the airlines, I wound up getting an Apple II myself. And somewhere in the mid 80s, one of my assignments was to a contract management office in Washington, DC, where they put me at a desk with a Wang terminal that had word processing and eventually limited PC types of operations. And I transitioned to PCs. I had been in user groups with the Apple II user group in Washington, and Dave Harvey, who's in our local Apple SIG, and I managed 2 different Apple BBSs there. And I wound up being a sysop of one of them. And when I came down here to Orlando, I established an Apple BBS in the late 80s. And I also joined the Central Florida Computer Society then, where I met Stan Wallner. I've been president of CFCS in the past, and helped form the Florida Association of Computer User Groups. So that's kind of my baseline. My first exposure to Linux was when I joined the Army civil service after retiring from the Navy and retiring from independent computer business. Somebody offered me a job and I said, yeah, why not? I've got nothing better to do. And I wound up traveling the world supporting contracts. And one of those contracts was to install Army's constructive simulation computers, and they used Red Hat Linux as their operating system. And although I was a contract manager, I was very interested in the tech behind it. And the company that was fulfilling the contract, Antion Incorporated, there people said, sure, sit in, so I learned a little bit about Linux then, most of which I've forgotten, but enough to be dangerous. And decided I wanted to do something at the house, and took an old computer, and I had a distro of Red Hat that was available to me, and I stuck that on it for a while and played with it. And again, forgot most of that until recently. So I thought it would just be a good idea to get re-involved with Linux and to learn it again from the ground up. I've probably forgotten more than I've ever learned. So it's been reigniting the neurons, which I have. Not to drag things out, but just let's go around. And I'm looking at my screen, and let me just double check participants again, see if anybody's waiting. Nobody's waiting. So I'll just go around my screen, and first on the left is John Kennedy. If you'd like to say hi and a little bit of your background, John.
Well, good evening. I'm John Kennedy. I'm also a recent recipient of a loss or a
Can't hear.
Ooh,
A little louder, John, if you can.
okay, well, that'll be the settings in here just a second.
I just raised my speaker to hear you, but
Yeah, well, I just
there you
had to
go.
raise the mic because Zoom didn't want to do it that way.
Sounds good now.
Yeah. Okay. I'm John Kennedy. I am from East Central Ohio Technology Users Group, which is about 40 miles east of Columbus, Ohio. And I am also an APCUG advisor for the regions 3 and 6. And I do host the APCUG's VTCs and Wednesday workshops, but I am a Linux supporter and enthusiast, not an expert, not by any means. And I got started with computers back in the late 70s, as a lot of us did. And I got started with the Atari computer, which I thought was ahead of its time because of the way it could daisy chain devices. But the difference between Atari and Apple was that Apple had the big publicity and marketing, and Atari didn't. So it went by the wayside. So I became a PC user. But I was an elementary school teacher, but my last 10 years, I taught computer skills at the middle school. And because I was one of the techie people, I was the building tech coordinator and got to be responsible for computers in the teachers' rooms. And then when I moved to the middle school, became the building coordinator and a junior systems operator for our network. I'm not an engineer. I learned enough to be an admin and ran it from there. But we were running a Linux box, and I got my first look at a SUSE, and the first box of about 10 floppy disks to install. But I soon switched to Ubuntu and did that for a number of years till I got upset with their philosophy of trying to take over the world like Windows did or wanted to. And so I moved to Mint for a number of years. And then I recently have been a number of years on MX Linux, which is a Debian based. But it's not the mainstay or mainstream. So I'm considering maybe switching back to either Ubuntu or Mint because things are developed first for those distributions, and something like MX, which is a popular one right now, but it's an offshoot of Debian, and I've had a couple things that have had to be tweaked by somebody else to get it to work. But I'm very supportive, and when Mike, I've sat in on the CFCS's meetings before. I'm a friend of Huey's. I'll be your presenter, I think, in a month. And when Mike talked about, or they talked about a Linux group, I wanted to be there to help get it going, but this is great. You've got about as many people as we've got in my Linux group at home. So I'm here to help make sure this one gets off the ground and rolling, because we need more Linux groups.
Thank you. Let's see. Next on my screen is my other entry, and I'm not going to have me introduce me again. So next on my screen is Jeff Glassman. If you'll say hi, just a short background.
Hello there, I'm Jeff Glassman. I'm on the other coast from Florida. I come from Southern California, Long Beach. I've been in computers for a few years, retired from the phone company, explored around, found a class on Linux, went to Ubuntu, and was just amazed at how much more I could do and how much easier it was, because as John mentioned, there's a lot of support for Ubuntu. If you run into a problem, you can usually find somebody that has not only encountered the same problem that you're encountering, but also giving you a way to fix it. So I worked for the phone company for 30 years, ran a bulletin board in the late 80s, and that's kind of my story.
Okay, welcome, Jeff. Mark Schulman.
Hi, I'm Mark Schulman, computer professional all my life. First couple of decades of my career, I actually taught Unix back before there was such a thing as Linux. So I had a lot of experience in it back then, but Linux has changed quite a bit in the intervening years. I still get to use Linux from time to time because I do a lot of websites and most of them are hosted in Linux. So just hoping to get better at it and have an opportunity to learn more here. So thanks.
Great. Dick Vogel. You'll have to unmute. Unmute, Dick. There we go.
Sometimes the keyboard works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, I'm Dick Vogel, originally from Colorado before I came to Florida. I've worked in the computer industry since 1963. And when I joined IBM and became a marketing rep for a few years, then I discovered, after I sold a few of those things, I found I liked working on them more than selling them. So I gave up the marketing aspect and went to work for a small college. And I ran their data center for about 10 years. We had an IBM 1130. I was strictly mainframe at this time. I hadn't gotten into little computers because they didn't exist. And so I followed along with that and moved to Colorado, where I was a data center manager and grew a set of computers to a pretty large size. And then they introduced the PC, and the PC was distributed to schools and departments and that sort of thing. And my first exposure was when my son's elementary school had a little PC and they allowed me to borrow it at night. So at night I would take the PC home and I would play with it. And I tried a little basic and learned basic and returned it in the morning. And that was kind of fun. I decided that was pretty neat. So then when they became readily available and IBM looked like they were going to be a big player, I got my first PC, which was an IBM PC. And I had a color monitor. And I thought that was big time. Anyway, so I've grown from that and stayed with PCs ever since. Now I just enjoy them as a hobby. I've pretty much stayed in the PC realm. And I'm just intrigued with Linux. And we'll try to see what I can learn. I've got it installed after Mike's coaching and encouragement on about a 10-year-old PC, a laptop that I have that is really slow. I had it up to Windows 7 and then they called it quits. It wouldn't install Windows 10. So, but it's working and I'm looking forward to seeing what I can do with it. My biggest complaint at this point with Linux is on my desktop, I have 3 monitors, and I really miss 3 monitors on my Linux laptop. So we'll see where that goes. Anyway, that's my story.
Okay, great. Paul, I see Paul Colton here. He told me earlier he was going to just see what he could absorb, but say hi to everybody, Paul.
Yeah, unlike you guys, I'm an electrical engineer, and I was in the Lockheed Martin aerospace business. I worked with computers, but not like you did. I had different kinds of language. I worked in Fortran and Atlas and other stuff like that. And I've been a techie all my life, TV repair. I worked for TV broadcasting stations, and I'm retired now. So, but I still do all kinds of tech stuff. I'm a hands-on hardware guy, basically, and I can do software, but that's not really what my focus ever really was. I can do programming, and I did enjoy it, but that's not how I made a living. So, but I did ask Mike to if I could sit in tonight, because I'm a techie, and I would like to kind of hear just to see what's going on. So that's a way summarized story of me, and so I'm just gonna listen to all you experts.
Well, we're all going to learn a little bit tonight, I have a feeling. Sean, if you'd say hi. Caught you right in a mouthful of food, sorry.
Sorry, busy day. My name's Sean, and I'm a Mac user from about 95, and then prior to that, a Mac user from about 93, and then prior to that, Apple II user from about 85. And I've been dabbling in Linux for several years, I guess maybe about 15, 20 years. So that's it. I'm looking forward to learning more about Linux. And thanks for setting this up, Mike.
Okay. Stu Butteroff, if I haven't scrambled your last name, I'm sorry.
Hey, that's okay, Mike. My name's Stu Butteroff. In fact, I was on one of the APCUG meetings today John Kennedy hosted. So John and I are together twice today. But at any rate, I live in Dunedin, Florida, over on the West Coast, right north of Clearwater. Our group is the Tampa Bay Computer Society, but I had a Linux SIG for 4 or 5 years, and there just wasn't much interest, and I was getting down that I'd only have 2 or 3 people show up for meetings, and so I stopped doing them. But I'm glad there's this group to come to. I worked, my first computer was a CPM computer. It wasn't the ones that were mentioned so far, but it had a double floppy drive and a mono monitor, and probably weighed 45 pounds. It was not. It was all one piece, and it was a heavy brute. And but I learned a lot on the CPM. Later, I got a PC clone, and I was working at the time for the Pinellas school system, and they were starting to put computers in schools, and I was working for the library media services department, and they had nobody that knew computers in the group. And so I volunteered to help some, and pretty soon we had computers in over 100 schools that managed the library circulation of computers. And we bought an off-the-shelf program that worked on Apple II's, later on, they worked on IBM PCs. And so I did that for years. The last 10 years of my working life, I worked at a parochial high school, and they had very little. They only had 4 computers at the school when I went there. And when I left, we had over 200. And I was able to manage the whole technology gamut at the school, from putting in the fiber optics underground to networking to installing servers. It was just wonderful. And it was all Windows. And I was never satisfied. Windows was my main operating system that I loved, but I could fix it and I could keep it running. But when I came home at nights, I played with Linux because it was just something that was fresh and new, and it wasn't something I had to do. It was something I wanted to do. So I worked with Linux, and then after I retired, I've been retired like 15 years now. I'm very satisfied to work with Linux. I run Linux Mint on this computer you're looking at tonight. I've had Linux Mint for probably 15 years, different versions of it. I'm up to Mint 20 now. And so Mint has just been an easy thing for me to use. I don't use the Linux. I use the Linux, but I'm not into it trying to do Linuxy things. I just use it as an all-around general computer, but it works fine for me. I like it. But every now and then my friends they all use PCs, and but I'm satisfied with the Linux, and so I'm glad that I can be here tonight from the West Coast, and so thanks for having me, and I hope to learn something.
Well, you're going to be a great resource for us. But that was my motivation too, is I've had Linux Mint installed on a desktop second computer in my office, and I've had it, I think, at least 5 years, if not longer. And the whole intent, I really never dug into it. It's just there, it's set up, it runs, and it does what I wanted it to do. So once we get this thing set up and running, we'll decide, what depths we want to dig to. Let's see, Peter Jarosek, you're next on my list.
Hey, everybody.
Yep.
Peter Jarosek. Let's see. I started with computers when I was 5. My dad worked at IBM and brought home an IBM XT. Played games on it until middle school. And since everybody's talking about schools, I'll talk a little bit about that. My middle school teacher in 7th grade got me into programming. And that's what I do for a living, or now I'm a manager of software development. But did that. My mentor, I ended up volunteering with and then working back at the same middle school as a teenager. And so got quite a bit of history working in middle school tech. Other than that, most of my career, I've been a software developer or manager of software developers. Work across all operating systems. Work has almost always been Windows based, with some Linux exposure to Red Hat and CentOS. First Linux I installed was probably, I think I was a teenager, probably Slackware back in probably mid 90s. And then I've got a couple Raspberry Pis with Ubuntu and a couple servers I pay for up in the cloud that run probably Ubuntu as well. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark Schulman.
Yes, sir.
Say hello and tell us a little bit about your background.
I already went, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw it all blanked out, and I apologize for my short-term brain lapse here.
No, that's all right.
Gotcha. Stan Wallner. If you're awake.
Okay,
Yep,
I'm
there you go.
unmuting and I'm going to restart my video. And I wish I had a timer here because this is all very interesting. And some of you know my story. I wound up, my first computer was when I moved down here in 1983. It was an IBM PC with the two quarter-inch floppies, and I was handed that and Lotus, and said, okay, I was going to do the budget for the branch of a national company that I was managing, and everything was fine. You know, you booted from the floppy, put another floppy in with a program, ran it, saved stuff to the B floppy. 8 months later, they came out with the XT with a hard drive. It was a monochrome, orange, I believe, green. And nobody in the company, which was a distributor for IBM in hospitals and universities, and no one knew what to do with it. And I wound up discovering the Central Florida Computer Society somehow, trying to figure out what to do, because it came up with a C prompt and you had the CD to Lotus and change it and then start the program. So it just seemed much more complicated. At that point, I spent a number of months, I think 8 or 9 months, Charlie Berg, some of the guys who were meeting at a, what was a MS-DOS SIG, and I didn't know about the main part of the Computer Society for a number of months. That was meeting at the St. Mark Street Center. And anyway, I got involved in it back in '83, and I have been president. I was back in, I guess, 97, 98, I think, and I was content to just be a member, but it was at the point of dissolving, and I decided, no, I don't want to see that happen. It's been a big part of my life. I've enjoyed it, made a lot of good friends, and I never really got into Linux too much. My wife had a Commodore 64 that I could see the value of VisiCalc, for example, but I never liked it. It just seemed so convoluted, so hard to get into. I never warmed up to it. And the company that I was with, we were hooked up with 1401 mainframes, and everybody had a terminal on their desk, and we were using, I think we call them ADMs, which were essentially emails to go back and forth with each other, so I could see the value of all that. But my main purpose to be here is to see this become a successful SIG of the Central Florida Computer Society. I have built a number of Mint computers, as a matter of fact, the Mint Linux, and found them extremely easy to use. But I'm still a PC guy. I never got into Macs, and there are a number of programs, including QuickBooks and Total Commander, for example, that I use constantly, file and directory manager. There's a version of that which will run on Linux, and I believe soon to be running on Mac. But, anyway, I'm just here to sit back and listen and enjoy and be part of the group. So thanks for having me. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
all attending.
And Darna Armitage, if you'd say hello to all of us.
Hello there. Can you see me? I can't tell. Anyway,
Yes.
You might all be over my head. I know that we're in Washington State. My husband and I, we're both have older computers that we'd like to put Linux on. Our problem is they're Windows, and I think you have to dual boot and change the boot and all this. And you know, we're real novices in that sense. I turn it on, everything works, I turn it off. So I think I might listen, but I don't think I can. I've got to find some way to even get Linux on my old laptop.
Well, we're gonna do that tonight.
Oh, okay. I thought you could just use a flash drive and plug it in.
Yep.
And it would just do it. So I don't have to dual boot and go into that,
Nope.
all that stuff.
No,
Oh.
that's what we're gonna do tonight in the next, well, 30 minutes anyway. We'll see how long this thing can go and how long
My
you want to
husband's
stick with
there
us.
too. He's Kenneth, and he was in computers. He's back there somewhere. I don't know if you can see him. Anyway, we're both listening. We tried the one that the other APUG did, and it went so fast and so many different choices. I just kind of got lost. So I need a real simple way to get it into the laptop and make it work. That's why I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, Donna, I'll even throw in the fact that
Oh,
that many of us will now say, we don't want you to do any dual booting because
Oh.
Windows does not play nice with Linux when they dual boot. And the easiest thing to do, as Mike said, was get it on a thumb drive and just boot to the thumb drive, or in past years, we would just boot to a CD, and it runs right from there. I have people I know that never install it on their computer. They just run it off of the media. and
So
it
when
works
I
great.
put it in and then just turn the computer on and it brings up Linux?
Well,
You might
we'll-
have to make a slight change that Mike's gonna talk about.
But we're
so
gonna-
that it auto boots.
Yeah, we'll do that.
All right, okay, well, that's our introduction. We're here. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll make a note that at about 40 minutes into the SIG is when we actually start our little trip into Linux. So the first thing I'm going to do is the famous words of Zoom, and that is share my screen again. So I'm going to share my screen. And I am now on my Windows computer, which has 2 monitors. So what you are looking at is linuxmint.com. Okay, and this is the main entry page for Linux Mint. Lots of different things you can do with it, but essentially all of the desktops are available. They have Cinnamon, they have Mate. I used to think it was Mate. They have XF and they have XFCE. And I don't know why I chose Cinnamon back when I originally chose it. I guess it was because it was the first one, and I never investigated the other desktops. So there are hundreds, if not thousands of distros. And then on top of that, many, many, many different desktops, if you want to call it graphical user interfaces. And we're gonna work with Cinnamon. And you will see that you can, from here, you can download, and you can download what's called an ISO file. And from that ISO file, you can make a flash drive or a CD. So what you can also get from here is the documentation. And if you go to the documentation page, one of those pages is an installation guide. And literally, it walks you through. Download, choose the right edition. They do want you to verify it, which I've done. Create the bootable media, boot it, install it. Any special drivers if required, troubleshooting, and so on. So they have a pretty good reference right on the Linux Mint page. If I can get up underneath screen sharing here. Okay, so bootable media, how to make a bootable USB stick. So in Linux Mint, they're saying if you have downloaded, which I will go show you that I did in fact download, go to my downloads folder. And here is Linux Mint 20.1. It is a 64-bit ISO. So that's what I downloaded. And if I right click on it in Windows, you can actually say burn disk image. And I was going to do that, but the instructions actually say to, whoops, let's get back to it, that under live boot image, they say, go ahead and, come on, get up underneath this, is download a file. Let's see here, Etcher, download Etcher. So I did in fact go to Etcher, and since it was recommended by the Mint page, it's probably not needed, but I just wanted to follow the instructions that were on the Linux Mint page. And so from Etcher, I ran it, and it prompts you to insert. First, it tells you to download it, which I did. And then from the download, let's go ahead back to that. So here's
downloaded on your PC, right?
Downloaded on my PC, right. And it installs itself, and I'm pretty sure, let me just go see my menu and see if I actually have Etcher on here, because I just follow, yes, I do. All right, so I'm going to open up that page. or that application. Let's see if it where it's going to pop up. All right, here we go. I'm going to bring it onto the screen. So when you've downloaded it, it installs it in Windows and it gives you this screen and it says flash from file. If you take your flash drive, and I've got a 16 gigabyte, which is probably twice as large as it needs to be. It probably only needs to be about a 4 gigabyte, but I just wanted to make sure I had enough room. They tell you to select the target, which is your USB, and they say flash it. And once it's done, you hold in your hand Linux Mint. So I'm going to take this off. Let's see here, stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to switch to, let me put the focus on the notebook. Okay, so everyone should see the large image of the notebook. If you don't see it, speak up. And let me just see here, not giving me a prompt. So here is the flash drive that was made. And I'm putting it into the USB port of this Lenovo notebook on the side. Put it in right side up. Okay, so it's in there. Now, most people are going to take an old computer that has Windows in one way, shape, or form on it. This particular notebook came from Smart Guys with Windows 10 on it. And Windows 10 has a number of security features that they don't like. Yeah, I'm not going to format it. Thank you. Okay, don't want to do any of that. Just close it all. Yeah, all right. Cancel, cancel, cancel. So most people have to figure out, how do I boot that USB drive? An older version of Windows 7, whether it's desktop or notebook, you can go into the BIOS and you can change the boot order and you can tell it to boot first from a USB drive. On a Windows computer, you can also go in and turn off the Windows boot manager, which I did do on my desktop and played around with it. But the easiest way is to actually cause Windows itself to do a boot and have that boot, let's see, restart. Have that boot under advanced startup options. Have that boot force it to give you the startup menu. So I'm going to choose that. And you will see from this menu, it says advanced startup, start from a device or disk such as a USB or DVD, change firmware settings, change Windows startup settings, and so on. So I'm going to tell it to start up. And I don't have to figure out which of the 12 keys is my boot menu, which I've done a number of times on different computers and still not been successful until I discovered this with Windows 10. As I say, older Windows 7 computers, you may be able to just do it with one of your function keys, F2 or F12. But this, to me, for a Windows 10 I find is the best way. So I'm going to say startup. So now, one of the comments I'll make is I've already checked out this particular USB stick, and as such, it's going to boot much faster than the very first time that you boot from it and you think nothing's happening. Because what it's doing is exactly what Donna said. It runs Mint as its startup, unlike Windows, which actually has a unique startup installation disk, also does repair. This actually installs a version of Linux Mint that you can actually play with before you even do the installation. So I'm going to just select that from the menu that came up. And instead of taking 10 minutes or so staring at a blank screen, this should only take about 1.5 minutes. Famous last words. And by the way, you may see some of these infomercials on TV, you know, that say run a computer from a USB drive and offer to sell you a USB flash drive that's supposed to make your computer faster by running its software from it. I've seen numerous ones like this, and I don't remember what they want, $29.95, $49.95, something like that. And all they're really doing is loading a distribution of Linux and having you run it right from the flash drive. In fact, I think Stan, you brought one in to our tech SIG and demonstrated it at one time. We're getting close because I just saw a flash. There we go. Okay, so about a minute to a minute and a half. Now notice on the screen, it's detected Wi-Fi networks, and this, as I say, it hasn't installed anything. It's just the driver says there's a Wi-Fi network. And right now I can literally go to the start button and I can start playing with everything, most everything that Linux Mint has to offer. I can go look at accessories. I can go look at graphics. I can get on the internet. I can get Office applications. I can play with sound and video. I can administer the computer, change preferences, do all kinds of things, and it's still not installed. This is running off of the flash drive. So what I'm going to do is go down to the system tray, pardon my Windows vernacular, and I'm going to find my Wi-Fi, and I'm going to log in. Take me a second. And it's now established. And it had found my printers that are Wi-Fi printer. Just added the first one. We have 3 printers in the house. Found my second one, and it should find the third one. Maybe only found 2 on this initial scan. But literally, I can start computing right now. I can open up under Internet. I can go to coming with the distribution is Firefox. I can open up Firefox. And I'm on the internet and I can start browsing. I can bring up my email, my web-based email, do all the things that you would normally do with a computer. And we're still just operating on that USB. So literally plug and play, you put it in. Now that's assuming that you've got a computer that have fairly current drivers that Linux knows about. I think, Sean, didn't you tell me that you put this on an old Mac and you had some problems getting all the necessary drivers?
I selected the wrong option. It was user error.
Okay, user driver error.
I think it works fine. I actually used Ubuntu, which is a similar, I think it's the same installer. And when I did the Ubuntu install, I used a different option and that worked fine. So I've yet to go back and install the Linux Mint, but I have Linux Mint running on a laptop similar to yours here.
Okay. All right. So what makes this an installation is the fact that one of my options sitting right on the desktop is install Linux Mint. There are several ways to actually do the install. You can go through this step by step, picking drive partitions, doing all kinds of things, which I have done and had to do it 2 or 3 times to get it to be proper. Or you can just say, I'm committing this computer to run 100% Linux and just go ahead and install. So I have not done this yet on this computer. So we are together about to install Linux Mint.
Mike, before you do that,
yep,
one of the things that I think you should point out, if you weren't going to and others know, is that even though you're running a live operating system, you can access that Windows computers and all the files that are on it. Because a live disk like this, you can just go to your file manager and you can open up files that are on your Windows computer and edit them, save them back in, create new ones and save it, because Linux reads Windows, which is not true the other way around. And that's what's great about Linux, in that it is a terrific tool for rescue and recovery of a Windows machine.
Okay, well, here's one of the disks that are on this particular one. And then here's, let's see what it says for file system. So this is, I think, is part of the USB distribution. So, and this is all part of the distribution. Haven't tried it, but put that in our hip pocket to try at some future time. Okay, so we are going to install an English version. So we'll go to continue. And yep, didn't realize there was Cherokee English, but that might be interesting to see. Install multimedia codecs. Codecs are required to play some video formats. And by default, it has chosen it. So I'm going to say continue. Oops, I didn't. No, I did not. Okay, let me go back and click that. Let me see if it will let me go back. Yes, because I do want whatever codecs are necessary to view videos. All right, I'm going to go back. There we go. Going to select that. Third-party drivers, secure boot. There is no password. So I'm going to uncheck that. Continue. Install Linux Mint alongside Windows Boot Manager. Don't recommend that. That's what we mentioned before. I'm going to commit this entirely to Linux. So now delete all programs, documents, photos, music, play any other files. So it's a good idea anyway. On another laptop, which I configured for my replacement of a Chromebook, I actually did do a step-by-step with advanced features and all the rest of that. And I deleted all the partitions myself, set up partitions, did all of that, played around with it, and had to start over because I couldn't ever get it to boot. So in this case, I'm just saying erase the disk, install Linux Mint. So we're going to say install now. If you continue, here's what's going to happen. So it's going to install an ESP partition, and it's going to install an ext4. Now I know ext4 is the file system like NTFS, but under Linux it's ext4. And I think ESP, somebody correct me on that, I think that is the security kinds of things, is it not?
That's to make it run on that computer because of what Windows has done to secure boot and stuff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. Continue. Okay, it's got the right time zone. Continue. Okay, so we're going to just call this, I'm not going to put let's call this CFCS. And that's fine with the computer's name, CFCS. Yeah, I know it's weak. I have actually on another computer just put in a single letter as a password, so it'll take it. I'm also going to let it log in automatically, so I don't think I have to type the password anyway. So it's not going to require my password to log in. And I'm not going to encrypt my data. So if you're going to be doing this on a notebook that you're going to take with you as you travel, that you could possibly lose, somebody might get an access to it. You'd want a strong password. You would not want to log in automatically, so it would require the password. And you might even want to encrypt your data that's stored on the computer. We're just going to do this. Welcome. Thank you for choosing Mint. So it is now 8 o'clock, and hopefully this session is not going to kick us off. I don't think it will, because we're on a professional session, so we can go past the hour. And we will get at least through verifying that this thing is installed, operating, and can reboot. And in our next session, we'll actually go through the configurations and the software that this gets installed. And it looks like the almost finished copying files. This is, by the way, an SSD as the primary, 128 gigabyte SSD, which is the primary drive on this computer. So it's pretty fast.
Hey, Mike.
Yep.
Down there where it says almost finished copying files, you can click on the little disclosure triangle and see more details if you're into that.
All right. Let's see. I guess it's going to show us the terminal, right? And then, yeah, okay. So what you're looking at is behind the graphical user interface is actually the Linux terminal, and various different commands have been batched into this installation, and they're being auto run. And one of these days I might learn all about that, but it's sort of interesting to see what's going on behind the scenes.
Is it possible to install it without any password?
I think it requires it, but the point is I've selected the options that don't require it on boot.
Yeah, you would have to have a password, because you can't do any administrative actions without what's called the root password. So you have to have a password. You just don't have to have one to log in.
For example, my second desktop is an HP computer, so I will now reveal its password, HP. Okay, so I can do all the root things necessary on that second computer just by hitting HP, and it's done. There's also a thing, I think it's called a security ring, if I remember correctly, and the browsers have a tendency to want that the very first time that you've booted up and loaded into the browser in any session, and it asks for that. I know there are terminal commands to bypass that, and we'll look that up as well. How are we doing here? I guess as also as a learning process, if you do look at this, you can see the kinds of things that are being installed, or the kind of video codecs that are supported. Okay, it's installing Libreoffice. Many of you may be aware of Libreoffice as an alternative to Microsoft Office. It's free. It will give you compatible documents, spreadsheets, presentations that can read and write, so that people with Office can open them and run them. And about the only thing I've seen is some of the presentations may not be 100% compatible with PowerPoint. But if you create something in LibreOffice Presentation Manager, you can use it just as you would use a PowerPoint presentation. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do when I do a workshop for APCUG shortly on the MeWe social media system, is use the Linux Presentation Manager to build some slides.
You just made me happy, Mike.
So you're not necessarily getting Skype, WhatsApp, Slack, and Telegram as part of the distribution, but it's interesting to see that this installation has been updated to say, hey, it's compatible with these things and they're available as Linux apps. So you don't really need to know what's going on in the background, but it's nice to see, you know, what's going on. This is a Core i5. It has 4 gigabytes of RAM, not a lot, but it seems to run quite nicely. And having that SSD as its main drive, it also speeds up the operations. Okay, and they are here, they're talking about the features of Libreoffice, Writer, Calc, Presentation Managers, Impress. I haven't played with Draw, and I didn't realize it came with the database, so that's good. I haven't played with a database in many years. Gaming is becoming popular as long as the computer itself has the necessary processing and memory capabilities. And the Steam as a provider and server for gaming software is now supported, or has been supported on Linux for quite some time. And that's probably something I'm going to play with a little bit, because I've got Elder Scrolls Skyrim on my Windows computer, and it'd be interesting to see if I can run it on a Linux computer. So we are working our way through. VirtualBox, there was a comment about getting to Windows and Wine. So there are, since we're not dual booting, if there are Windows applications that you really do want to run, you can create a virtual computer which will then let you load Windows in as one of the images. Or you can run Wine, which is supposed to act as an interpreter and let you run certain Windows programs. So down the line, we may try that too. All right, so that wasn't too bad, about 7 minutes.
Hey.
You know, so it says I can continue testing or restart now. Now it may tell me to take this out, or it may want me to leave it in. So let's just click on restart now. It should tell me to remove. Didn't tell me to remove it. So
Give it a
let's see.
second.
Yeah, there you go. And remove the installation medium. Okay. All right. Truth time. Press enter.
One of the things that I missed about Windows was that when you were installing, you don't have enough time to go away and have dinner because it's going to be done too quick.
Well, older computer with a standard hard drive might take a little longer, but, and like I said, I found it interesting that that particular USB stick is actually set up the very first time that you use it with a second partition, I guess, for its temporary files. So we're in. Connection is, and it said connection established. So it remembered the information that I put in. And more than just telling you about what this can do, this can take you through now an interactive setup for the different themes, for the panel layout, system snapshots, whatever. So at the end, notice that it is in fact detecting, I don't have to install my printer drivers. It's detecting my printers and going through. It does have its own file system. So if I double click on that, you will see that if I don't want to get involved in all the ins and outs of the file system and how it's structured and where it puts things and so on, I've got my desktop, I've got my documents, which I don't have anything in. I've got where music will go. I've got where pictures will go. I've got where videos will go, and automatically where downloads will be downloaded to. And then if I really want to dig into it, it'll show me the contents of the file system. So we spent a half hour or so introducing ourselves and then talking a little bit about Linux. and then we booted into the USB after it was made. And really, the setup itself, other than the time it will actually take for that USB to actually initialize the first time, which will probably be about 5 minutes. So don't despair if you have a blank screen for 5 minutes while that USB is booting for the first time. We're up and we're running, and it's been about 10 minutes as part of the setup. So I'm going to take the spotlight off of that for the moment. Okay, and I'm going back to the gallery view so I can see all your smiling faces. I'm probably going to do something I said I wasn't going to do. I'm going to install Zoom on this computer between now and next month's meeting, so that I will actually be 100% on this computer when we do it. And then we'll go through the configuration of the desktop and the setup and the programs and all the rest of that directly from this computer as a participant. So that brings me to the subject of when do we meet on a regular basis? The original thought was that we would meet the first Wednesday of each month. And I didn't hear any of us say that they were with the Sarasota technology user group, which Huey Poplock is a member of, and they do meet on the first Wednesday of each month, which is when we were proposing to move. And I had one person email me saying that I think it was from Michigan, said that he could not join us tonight, but he wanted to look at the recording. So my question to you all is, which do you prefer, a first Wednesday or a second Wednesday, as we're currently doing now? Any thoughts?
Doesn't matter to me.
Let's see. Do I get to do a poll? Yeah, I can do a poll. All right. Add a question. Yeah. Now what?
Do you also want to, in your poll, consider whether you want a daytime or an evening meeting?
Well, I think we're going to stay at 7 for myself, for my own purposes too. What time, what day? Yeah, I can
Looks
move
like the
out.
first Wednesday is the Sarasota Technology User Group meeting.
Right. But we don't have anybody from Sarasota with us.
Yeah, it was going to be my question, even though I'm the outsider, if nobody from Sarasota is going to be joining, then at the moot point, but maybe you would if you stay on the second.
First Wednesday, second Wednesday. And might as well do third Wednesday and fourth Wednesday. Give you guys more choices.
Well, if it was this month, there could be a fifth Wednesday.
Okay, so there's the questions. Let's see here. Title, what Wednesday? All right, and then let's see here. Okay, save. I just saved the poll. What day do you like? Launch it. Okay, the poll is now active.
Mike, what should I select if I don't care?
Today, I guess, second Wednesday.
All right.
So far, that's the only one that's been checked. Okay, it looks like, ta-da. Well, we did get by a very narrow result was third Wednesday. Okay, so 9 of us would like to do this on the second Wednesday. So next month will be, let me go to my calendar. And we're
The 9th.
June, so it looks like it'll be Wednesday, the 9th. June 9th. And I will ask that question again next month, just in case we get a whole bunch of people in it says, geez, I really would have done it, except if you did this on the first Wednesday, but it's going to be recorded anyway. So the focus next week is continuing from this initial setup, but those that are considering it, including Donna, I urge you, if you need to, I will be posting this video and you can go back to the video, you can pause it, and you can do each of the steps that we did along with it. Give it a shot. Worst case, you just do it again and see if you're successful installing Mint. You may get well past where we did today, but you can see with a little research, within an hour, you should be up and running Linux.
Hey, Mike, did Donna actually get enough information to try this?
What do you think, Donna?
I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to get rid of, I guess I'll obviously get rid of Windows on that laptop. It has Windows 10. So I will go read the Mint thing and try it. My husband's here if I get stuck. He can help me. Maybe
Hey,
he's more brilliant than me.
Hey,
But
Donna,
I'll give it, yeah.
you might want to look at your Windows laptop, your files in there. If you want to save anything, you're going to have to pull them off and put them on the USB drive or something. If you do it the way we did it tonight. So you make sure you save whatever you need off of it, because afterwards you'll never get it again.
Okay, the only concern I have is I use SeaMonkey as my browser for my email from Comcast, and it downloads, and it doesn't sound like, I don't think SeaMonkey has a Linux, but that's my private, that's where I do most of my email. That's very, very important.
Is
That's the only concern.
SeaMonkey a mail reader, or is it?
No, it's the old Netscape suite. So it's part of Mozilla, but it's outside of Firefox. And I never went to Thunderbird. I stayed because I can, when we traveled, I would download my email and then log off. So I like that fact. The rest of my other email comes through Gmail or Yahoo. It's no big deal. My only concern is that I could not get my Comcast email because of SeaMonkey.
What Linux Mint puts Thunderbird on your drive. It installs Thunderbird on the system. Now Thunderbird is a part of Firefox also, or it's related to Firefox.
Right, it's still Mozilla, right?
Yes, so you should be able to make it work. You know, however your settings are in the SeaMonkey, but again, you're going to have to copy all that stuff before you lose it. You know, so just a warning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
There is a handout too.
Mike, can I jump in?
Sure, please, Mark.
I don't know if everybody's got a spare computer that they can try this out on. I certainly wouldn't. I find that if especially if you just want to get to know Linux, the best way to do it is to run it in a virtual machine. I've always had Linux installed in a virtual machine on my PC. So I boot under Windows, but then I can boot up right within Windows. I can boot up Linux and copy and paste between Linux and Windows, and Mint just runs in the virtual machine. And I wonder if people who just want to experiment and get a chance to try out Mint might find that a better solution than trying to dig up a whole separate computer to run it on.
If you do that, and you're successful doing it, and you're happy with it, and you have actually done things like if you set Thunderbird up instead of SeaMonkey and things like that, can you save the image of the virtual machine, and then once you've installed Linux on another notebook, can you restore that to actually be the installation that's running on the new computer.
Oh, you mean to have it just run natively if you decide you don't want to run it in a virtual machine?
Well, in other words, if you, yeah, since this would be the same actual computer, and if you're running virtually and you save the virtual image from session to session, and then say, all right, I'm ready to actually install Linux on this computer. I have everything configured the way I want it in my virtual machine. Is there a way to say, save that image on an external hard drive, install Linux on the main computer, then do something to get that image back and then have it overwrite or somehow make the process easier transitioning?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. You can just do a backup and then go over to a regular machine and restore the backup, and I think you'd be on your way. I've never tried that. I don't have any interest in it because you know, I need to use Windows for my work, so I can't ever completely switch to Linux, but I like to be able to get into Linux whenever I want. So the virtual machine's a really nice way to handle that.
Okay.
When I installed Linux Mint, I installed it with the dual boot feature. So it comes up with a menu and you choose whether you want to boot to Linux or you want to boot to Windows.
Right. Right.
So there are other options, Donna, but I think since SeaMonkey seems to be your critical path, what you might consider doing is downloading Thunderbird for Windows in parallel. And once it's installed in your Windows computer, try setting it up with the same settings you're using in SeaMonkey and see if it will get your mail. The key will be in the settings to tell Thunderbird to leave the email on the server, not to pull it off. Just leave it there and put a copy on your local computer. And if you're
Mike?
successful, then you shouldn't have any problem setting it up under Linux.
I just put it in the chat window. I just put a link to the SeaMonkey project. It looks like it's available for Linux.
Oh, great. Okay, so Donna and others on your screen, if you'll notice, there is a chat icon. I'm just clicking mine now, and there is the SeaMonkey link.
Oh, that's perfect. That's all I needed to know. I needed to verify I could do that. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure, that was actually Pete who had to leave. He sent me that link.
Hey, and
Okay.
that would mean if you backed up that whole directory for if you once you move things and put it on Thunderbird and you're happy, if you back up the whole Thunderbird folder and get it off the computer before you install the Linux, you can reinstall that back into your system. You can drag it back in and put it in your home folder, and you'll have all your mail will be there. You know, it's pretty nice. I've done it several times.
Addresses. Okay.
All right, several
address
options
book,
anyway.
everything's there.
Good.
Perfect. Thank you. That was my big concern.
All righty, guys. Well, I think we had a successful meeting. I'll stay in touch using the Google group as we get tips and techniques. I will post that SeaMonkey link on Google Groups too.
Okay.
And hope to see you next month, and we'll see. Hopefully Stu will maintain interest in this SIG for a while, enough to keep us all interested.
Yep. Okay.
Any parting comments?
No.
Yes, I'll tell you, the only reason I use SeaMonkey is I never get a virus. I never get anything. It works perfectly without any problems ever, ever, ever. So it's wonderful. I know most people like others, but I like it because it keeps all the viruses out of my machine.
Well, one of the nice things about going to Linux is it's the home user Linux installations very, very low on priority for targets for viruses and hacking and ransom and all the rest of that. And to be perfectly honest with you, I have now, with this new desktop, there's now 4 Linux computers here in the house. And of the other 3, only one of them has had an antivirus program on it, I think it's Clam AV, something like that. And it's been on it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. The virus definitions have been kept up. It's never, ever detected anything on that. And there's never been because the links that come in emails and the attachments that come in emails and all the rest of that are all designed to run on Windows or Macs.
Right.
And not so much Macs, but they are targeting Apple computers too. Maybe eventually they'll get around to it as more people go to Linux to get away from what's happening in big tech machines. But okay, all. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Let me just get up here and
Mike.
say stop recording.